My sister stole my epilepsy medication while my parents watched and said I was being dramatic about my condition. For 3 years, Sarah had been taking my pills whenever she felt anxious, and Mom and Dad always sided with her because sharing is caring in this family. But what they didn't know was that missing those doses was building up to something catastrophic. During our family's inheritance court hearing, their negligence almost killed me. What the judge discovered that day changed everything and exposed the truth they tried to hide. I'm Rebecca Martinez, and this is the story of how my family's twisted version of love nearly cost me my life, and how justice finally found its way into our perfectly decorated suburban home. The Martinez family Christmas photo from 2019 still sits on my mother's mantelpiece, all of us smiling in matching red sweaters. Patricia and Robert Martinez flanking their 2 daughters, Sarah with her arm around me, both of us beaming at the camera. If you saw that photo, you'd think we were the perfect American family. You'd be wrong. My name is Rebecca Martinez. I'm 32 years old, and I work as a senior accountant at a mid-sized firm in Denver. On paper, my life looks pretty good. I own a small condo, drive a reliable Honda Civic, and have a savings account that would make most people my age jealous. But there's something that photo doesn't show you. The orange pill bottle I keep in my purse at all times, the medical alert bracelet I never take off, and the constant anxiety of wondering when my next seizure might hit. I have epilepsy. I was diagnosed at 19 after collapsing during my sophomore year of college. The doctor said it was likely genetic, possibly triggered by stress. They put me on a medication called Keppra, and for the most part, it works. Take it twice a day, every day, same time each day. Miss a dose, and my brain starts misfiring. Miss multiple doses, and things get dangerous fast. My family has always had what my mother calls traditional values. Patricia Martinez believes in family dinners every Sunday, helping your siblings no matter what, and never airing your dirty laundry in public. Family first always, she'd say, usually while adjusting one of her many cross necklaces. My father, Robert, is quieter but echoes the same sentiment. He's a retired construction foreman who still believes that hard work and family loyalty are the only things that matter in life. Then there's Sarah, my little sister, 3 years younger than me, with the kind of effortless charm that makes people instantly love her. Growing up, Sarah was the social butterfly while I was the bookworm. She was homecoming princess. I was treasurer of the math club. She dated the quarterback. I dated textbooks. Our parents never explicitly said they had a favorite, but the way they lit up when Sarah walked into a room told a different story. After college, Sarah bounced between jobs, retail, receptionist work, a brief stint as a yoga instructor. Nothing ever stuck. She'd get fired for being late too often, or she'd quit because her boss was toxic, or the job just wasn't fulfilling enough for her creative spirit. Each time, Mom and Dad would welcome her back home with open arms and a lecture about how the world just didn't appreciate her unique qualities. Meanwhile, I worked 60-hour weeks, saved every penny, and visited dutifully every Sunday for family dinner. I was the responsible one, the one who had her life together, the one who never asked for anything. And somehow, that made me the problem. The first time Sarah took my medication, I thought it was an accident. It was about 3 years ago, during one of her rough patches after losing another job. I was staying over for the weekend, helping Mom redecorate the guest room, when I noticed my Friday evening dose was missing from my weekly pill organizer. "Oh, that," Sarah said when I asked about it, barely looking up from her phone. "I took one. I was having a panic attack, and I remembered reading somewhere that epilepsy meds can help with anxiety. Sorry, I should have asked." I stared at her, my heart rate picking up. "Sarah, you can't just take someone else's prescription medication. These pills are calibrated specifically for my brain chemistry, and I need every single dose." Mom overheard from the kitchen and came bustling in, wearing her favorite apron that read, "World's Best Mom." "What's all this fuss about?" "Sarah took one of my epilepsy pills," I explained, trying to keep my voice calm. Mom looked at Sarah, then back at me, and I saw something flicker across her face. Not anger at Sarah, but annoyance at me for making it an issue. "Honey, it's just one pill." Sarah was having a hard time, and she was just trying to feel better. Sharing is caring, you know that. But Mom, these aren't aspirin. I can't miss doses. My doctor was very clear. Rebecca, Dad's voice cut through from his recliner, not even bothering to look away from his evening news. Your sister needed help. That's what family does. We help each other. I felt that familiar twist in my stomach, the one I'd been feeling since childhood whenever I tried to advocate for myself and somehow ended up being the villain. I understand that. But this is different. This is my medication. I could have a seizure if I miss doses. Sarah looked up then, her big brown eyes filling with tears. Oh my God, Becca, I'm so sorry. I didn't think. I was just feeling so awful and I panicked. I would never want to hurt you. And just like that, the focus shifted. Suddenly, it wasn't about Sarah taking my medication without asking. It was about me making Sarah feel bad for having anxiety. Mom rushed over to hug her, shooting me a look that clearly said, "Look what you've done." "It's okay, sweetheart," Mom cooed, stroking Sarah's hair. "Rebecca knows you didn't mean any harm. Don't you, Rebecca?" What was I supposed to say? That no, I didn't think it was okay for my sister to steal my medication? That I was tired of being expected to sacrifice my own well-being for Sarah's feelings? That maybe, just maybe, there were boundaries even family shouldn't cross? Instead, I swallowed my words and nodded. Of course. Just, please ask next time, okay? Sarah sniffled and gave me a watery smile. Of course. I love you, sissy. 3 weeks later, it happened again. This time, she took 2 pills. I had a really bad anxiety episode, she explained. I was going to ask, but you weren't here, and Mom said it would probably be fine. I looked at my mother, who was suddenly very busy wiping down already clean countertops. Mom? Well, honey, Sarah was having such a hard time, and you always say how well your medication works. I thought maybe it could help her too. You have plenty, right? No, I wanted to scream. I don't have plenty. I have exactly what I need, prescribed specifically for me, by a doctor who went to medical school. But instead, I took a deep breath and tried to explain again about dosing schedules and brain chemistry and the very real danger of missing medication. You're being awfully dramatic about this, Dad said from behind his newspaper. It's just a couple of pills. You're acting like Sarah tried to poison you or something. That word, dramatic, hit me like a slap. It was the same word they'd used when I was 7 and cried because Sarah broke my favorite toy. The same word they'd used when I was 16 and got upset because Sarah wore my dress to prom without asking and spilled punch all over it. The same word they'd used my entire life whenever I dared to express any negative emotion or set any kind of boundary. I'm not being dramatic, I said quietly. I'm trying to manage a medical condition. Oh, come on, Sarah chimed in, recovered from her earlier tears. It's not like you have cancer or something. You take a pill and you're fine. I take the same pill and I'm fine too. What's the big deal? The big deal was that epilepsy medication isn't a vitamin you can share. The big deal was that my brain needed consistent levels of medication to prevent electrical storms that could kill me. The big deal was that I was starting to feel like I was going crazy, like maybe I was being dramatic and selfish and all the things they said I was. But I didn't say any of that. Instead, I went to CVS the next day and got a small lockbox for my medication. I told myself it was temporary, just until I could figure out how to make them understand. Mom found the lockbox 2 days later while helping me unpack groceries in my condo. Rebecca Marie Martinez, she said, holding up the small metal box like it was evidence of a crime. What is this? It's to keep my medication safe, I said, not meeting her eyes. Safe from who? Your own family? Her voice was rising, taking on that hurt tone she used whenever she wanted to make me feel guilty. I cannot believe you would lock away medication that could help your sister. What has gotten into you? Mom, these pills aren't meant to help anxiety. Sarah should see a doctor. Sarah can't afford a doctor right now, and you know that. She doesn't have fancy health insurance like you do. All she has is family, and apparently that's not good enough for you anymore. I felt tears starting to burn behind my eyes. How had I become the bad guy in this situation? How was keeping my own medication in a box being selfish? I'm not trying to be selfish, I whispered. I just need my medication to be available when I need it. Well, maybe if you cared about your sister's well-being as much as you care about your pill schedule, we wouldn't have this problem. That night, I called my doctor's office and asked about getting an emergency refill. The nurse was concerned when I explained that some of my medication had been misplaced. "Ms. Martinez, it's very important that you don't miss doses," she said. "How many pills are we talking about?" I couldn't bring myself to say that my family had been taking them. It sounded insane when I thought about it in those terms. Just a few. I was wondering if there was any way to get a small emergency supply. "I can give you a one-time emergency refill, but you'll need to be more careful with your medication. Missing doses can be very dangerous." As if I didn't know that already. The pattern, once established, became as regular as sunrise. Sarah would have what she called an anxiety episode. My medication would go missing, and I would be the unreasonable one for being upset about it. What started as just one pill became 2, then 3, sometimes an entire day's worth. "I had a panic attack at my job interview," Sarah would explain. Or, "I couldn't sleep and remembered you saying your pills help with that." Or, "Mom said it was okay because you weren't using them that day anyway." That last one was my personal favorite. Apparently, in my mother's mind, if I hadn't physically touched my pill bottle by noon, the medication was fair game for anyone else who might need it. The fact that I took my doses at specific times, 8 a.m. and 8 p.m., seemed to be irrelevant. The lockbox lasted exactly 1 week. I came home from work to find it sitting open on my kitchen counter, empty, with a note from Sarah. "Borrowed a few for my job interview tomorrow. Thanks, sissy." When I called her, she was genuinely confused by my anger. "How did you even get into the lockbox?" I demanded. "Oh, that little thing?" The combination was easy to figure out. You used your birthday, just like you use for everything. Anyway, what's the big deal? I only took 3. 3 is an entire day's worth of medication, Sarah. And how is it not a big deal that you broke into my locked box? Broke in? God, you're so dramatic. It's not like it was a bank vault. Besides, Mom gave me the spare key to your place, and she said she was sure you wouldn't mind helping me out. I felt the familiar sensation of the ground shifting beneath my feet. "Mom gave you my spare key?" "Well, yeah, for emergencies. And this was kind of an emergency. I had that interview at the marketing company, and I was having major anxiety about it." "Did you get the job?" There was a pause. "No, but that's not the point. The point is, you're my sister, and I needed help." The point, I wanted to say, was that my medication wasn't a community resource. The point was that I was starting to have breakthrough seizures because my dosing schedule was constantly being disrupted. The point was that I was beginning to feel like a stranger in my own family. But instead of saying any of that, I did what I always did. I swallowed my frustration and made another appointment with my doctor to discuss adjusting my medication schedule to account for the pills that kept disappearing. Dr. Peterson was a kind woman in her 50s who had been managing my epilepsy for over a decade. She listened to my carefully worded explanation about missing medication with growing concern. "Rebecca, you're describing a pattern of missed doses that could be very dangerous," she said, leaning forward in her chair. "Your seizures have been well controlled for years. This increase in breakthrough episodes is alarming." I nodded, staring at my hands. "I know. I've been trying to be more careful." "Can you help me understand how the medication is going missing? Are you forgetting doses, or is there something else going on?" I opened my mouth to tell her everything, about Sarah, about my parents, about the constant gaslighting and the way my family made me feel crazy for wanting to keep my own medication. But then I imagined trying to explain it to someone who had never met my family, someone who might not understand how complicated family dynamics could be. "Sometimes I forget," I lied, "and sometimes other people might take them by mistake." Dr. Peterson's eyebrows went up. "Other people are taking your epilepsy medication? Rebecca, that's not just dangerous for you. It could be dangerous for them too. These medications aren't meant to be shared." "I know. I've tried to explain that. Who are we talking about here? Roommates? A partner?" "Family," I said quietly. She was quiet for a long moment. "I see. Rebecca, I need you to understand something. Your epilepsy medication isn't optional. It's not something you can share or skip or be casual about. The dosing schedule exists for a reason. Your brain needs consistent levels of this medication to prevent seizures. I understand that, but they don't seem to. Then you need to make it clear. This is your health we're talking about, your safety. She pulled out her prescription pad. I'm going to give you a small emergency supply, but this can't keep happening. If you continue to have medication access issues, we may need to discuss other options. What kind of other options? Well, there are extended-release formulations that might be harder to misplace. Or we could look into having your medication delivered directly to your workplace instead of your home. The fact that my doctor was essentially helping me hide my medication from my own family felt surreal, but it also felt necessary. That Sunday, I decided to bring it up at family dinner. Maybe if I explained things differently, used Dr. Peterson's words instead of my own, they would finally understand. We were having Mom's famous pot roast, the same recipe she'd been making since I was a kid. Sarah was in a good mood, telling us about her new part-time job at a boutique. Dad was nodding along, and Mom was beaming with pride at her youngest daughter's latest adventure. So the manager said I have a real eye for fashion, Sarah was saying. She thinks I could move into visual merchandising if I stick with it. That's wonderful, honey, Mom said, refilling Sarah's wine glass for the second time. Doesn't that sound exciting, Rebecca? It does, I agreed, and I meant it. I wanted Sarah to be happy and successful. I just wanted her to find that happiness without taking my medication. Actually, speaking of jobs, I said carefully, I wanted to talk to everyone about something. My doctor says the stress of my medication going missing is making my seizures worse. She's worried it could become dangerous. The mood at the table shifted immediately. Mom's smile tightened, and Dad set down his fork with a little too much force. Are you seriously going to make this dinner about your pills again? Sarah asked, rolling her eyes. It's not about the pills, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. It's about my health. Dr. Peterson says, Oh, here we go with Dr. Peterson again, Mom interrupted. Did you tell Dr. Peterson that your sister has been struggling with anxiety? Did you mention that she can't afford to see a doctor of her own right now? That's not really relevant to my medical situation. Of course it's relevant, Dad said. Sarah is family. If there's something that can help her and you have access to it, then that's what you do. You help. I felt my chest tightening, that familiar sense of being cornered. But Dad, sharing prescription medication is actually illegal, and it's dangerous. These pills aren't meant to treat anxiety. Illegal? Sarah laughed, a sharp sound. Oh my God, are you going to call the cops on me? Turn in your own sister for trying to manage her mental health? That's not what I'm saying. Then what are you saying? Mom's voice was rising now. Because it sounds like you're saying that following some doctor's rules is more important to you than your sister's well-being. I'm saying that I need my medication to be available when I need it, I said, my voice getting smaller despite my efforts to sound confident. I'm saying that missing doses could cause me to have a seizure that could seriously hurt me. Could, might, maybe, Sarah said dismissively. You always talk about what could happen, but you're fine. You take your pills, you're fine. I take your pills, I'm fine. Everyone's fine. But I'm not fine, I said, and to my horror, my voice cracked. I'm having breakthrough seizures. I'm anxious all the time because I never know when my medication might not be there. I feel like I'm going crazy because everyone keeps telling me this isn't a big deal when it feels like the biggest deal in the world. The table went silent. For a moment, I thought maybe I'd finally gotten through to them. Maybe they would see how much this was affecting me and realize that they needed to find another solution for Sarah's anxiety. Instead, Mom reached across the table and patted Sarah's hand. See what you've done? She said softly to me. Look how upset you've made your sister. I looked at Sarah, who was indeed crying now, her face buried in her hands. I never wanted to hurt you, Sarah said through her tears. I'm struggling so much right now, and the pills were the only thing that helped. But if you hate me that much— I don't hate you, I said quickly. Sarah, I love you. I just need— You need us to treat you like you're more important than the rest of us, Dad said quietly. That's what this is really about, isn't it? You've got your fancy job and your college degree, and now you think you're too good to share with your family. The words hit me like a physical blow. That's not fair. That's not what this is about at all. But even as I said it, I wondered if maybe they were right. Maybe I was being selfish. Maybe I was putting my own comfort above my sister's mental health. Maybe the seizures weren't that serious, and I was just being dramatic like they always said. I think, Mom said in that tone she used when she wanted to end a conversation, that we all need to remember what's really important here. We're family. We take care of each other. And sometimes that means making sacrifices. I looked around the table, at my parents, who were looking at me with disappointment, and at Sarah, who was still sniffling into her napkin, and I realized that somehow, once again, I had become the villain in my own story. "You're right," I said finally. "I'm sorry." And for the first time in my life, I meant it. I was sorry. Sorry that I had been born into a family that could convince me that advocating for my own health was selfish. Sorry that I was so weak that I couldn't stand up to them. Sorry that I was about to walk away from that dinner table and do absolutely nothing to protect myself. But most of all, I was sorry that it would take nearly dying in front of a judge for any of us to realize how wrong we all were. The inheritance hearing was scheduled for a Thursday morning in March. My grandmother, Elena Rodriguez, had passed away 6 months earlier, leaving behind an estate worth just over $800,000. Most of it was tied up in her house, a beautiful old Victorian that had been in our family for 3 generations. But there was also a substantial savings account and some valuable jewelry. Grandma Elena had always been the backbone of our family, the one person who seemed to see through everyone's nonsense and love us anyway. She was the one who taught me that being quiet didn't mean being weak, and that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is simply survive. She was also the one person in my family who never made me feel like my epilepsy was an inconvenience or a character flaw. In her will, she had divided everything equally between her 4 grandchildren, me, Sarah, and our 2 cousins from Dad's side of the family. It should have been straightforward, but as with everything else in the Martinez family, it became complicated. Sarah had been struggling financially for months. Her part-time job at the boutique wasn't enough to cover her expenses, and she'd been living at home with Mom and Dad, sleeping in her childhood bedroom and borrowing money for basic necessities. The inheritance represented a life-changing sum for her, enough to get her own apartment, maybe go back to school, start fresh. For me, the inheritance was significant, but not life-changing. My job paid well, I had savings, and I'd been financially independent for years, but the money represented something more important than financial security. It represented my grandmother's love and her belief that I was worthy of being taken care of. The problem started 3 weeks before the court hearing. I was at my parents' house for Sunday dinner when Sarah brought up her latest crisis. She'd been selected for a management training program at a high-end retail chain, but she needed to complete a series of interviews and assessments over the following month. It was a real opportunity, the kind of career break she'd been hoping for, but the stress of the interview process was triggering her anxiety in a major way. "I haven't slept properly in 2 weeks," she told us, picking at her mashed potatoes. "Every time I close my eyes, I just replay all the ways I might mess this up. And during the day, I feel like I can't breathe. It's like there's this weight on my chest all the time." Mom made sympathetic noises and suggested chamomile tea and meditation apps. Dad offered to pay for a massage. I suggested that maybe it was time for Sarah to see a real doctor about her anxiety. "With what money?" Sarah asked bitterly. "Do you know how much therapy costs? How much anxiety medication costs without insurance?" I looked it up. It's like $300 just for the initial appointment. "Maybe you could apply for financial assistance programs," I suggested. "A lot of clinics offer sliding scale fees." Or, Sarah interrupted, "I could just keep using what's already working." My heart sank. I'd been so careful lately, keeping my medication with me at all times, taking it exactly on schedule. I'd even started keeping a backup supply at my office just in case, but I could see the direction this conversation was heading. "Sarah, we've talked about this," I said gently. "My medication isn't meant for anxiety. You really should see someone who can prescribe the right thing for you. But yours works, she said, her voice taking on that wheedling tone that meant she was about to cry. It's the only thing that's ever helped me sleep, and I really need to be at my best for these interviews. This could change everything for me, Becca. I looked around the table, seeing the familiar expression on my parents' faces, the one that said I was about to be the bad guy again. How many pills are we talking about? I asked reluctantly. Just enough to get me through the next few weeks, maybe one in the morning and one at night, just to take the edge off. 2 pills a day. For 3 weeks. That was 42 pills, nearly a month's worth of my medication. Sarah, I can't give you that many pills. That would leave me without enough for myself. What if we asked your doctor for extra? Mom suggested. You could explain that you're sharing with Sarah. Mom, I can't tell my doctor I'm sharing prescription medication with someone who isn't supposed to have it. That's not how medicine works. Then what if Sarah comes with you to your next appointment? Dad suggested. Maybe your doctor could prescribe something for her too. I blinked at him. Dad, Dr. Peterson is a neurologist. She specializes in epilepsy, not anxiety disorders. Sarah needs to see a psychiatrist or a therapist. But that would take weeks to set up, Sarah said, and now she was crying. The interviews start next Monday. I can't wait weeks to get help. This is my one chance, Becca. Please. I felt the familiar weight of guilt settling on my shoulders. Here was my sister asking for help with a real problem, and I was focusing on technicalities and rules. Maybe I could skip a few doses just to help her get through this crucial time. Maybe I was being rigid and selfish, like they always said. What if I just gave you a few pills? I offered. Not enough for twice a day, but maybe enough for the really important interviews? Sarah's face lit up. Really? Oh my God, thank you. You're the best sister ever. But even as I agreed to it, something felt wrong. I'd been down this road before, and it never ended well. Still, I told myself this was different. This was temporary, and it was for something really important. That night, I counted out 10 pills and put them in a small bottle for Sarah. It felt like a reasonable compromise, enough to help her through the worst of her anxiety, but not so many that I'd be putting myself at risk. The pills were gone in 4 days. I'm so sorry, Sarah said when I confronted her about it. The anxiety was worse than I expected, and I had to take them more often. But the good news is, I think I nailed the first round of interviews. They want me back for the final round next week. Sarah, those pills were supposed to last you 2 weeks. I know. But I really think this is working. I felt so much calmer during the interviews. Please, can you spare just a few more? Just to get me through the final round? And because I was weak, because I wanted my sister to succeed, because I couldn't stand the thought of being responsible for her missing out on this opportunity, I gave her more pills. This pattern continued for the next 2 weeks. Sarah would run out of pills faster than expected. I would reluctantly give her more, and my own medication supply would dwindle. I started skipping my morning doses, telling myself I could make it work if I was just careful about timing. But my brain had other plans. The first breakthrough seizure happened on a Tuesday morning while I was getting dressed for work. I remember reaching for my blazer, and then suddenly I was on the floor of my bedroom, my tongue bleeding and my muscles aching. I'd been seizure-free for almost 3 years, so the experience was jarring and terrifying. I called in sick to work and made an emergency appointment with Dr. Peterson, who was predictably concerned. "When was your last missed dose?" she asked after I described the seizure. I couldn't tell her the truth, that I'd been skipping doses so my sister could take my medication for her job interviews. It sounded insane even in my own head. "I might have missed a dose yesterday," I said carefully. "I've been really stressed lately." Dr. Peterson frowned at my chart. "Rebecca, you've been asking for early refills and emergency supplies for months now. I'm starting to wonder if there's something else going on here. Are you taking more medication than prescribed? Are you having breakthrough seizures that you haven't told me about?" "No, nothing like that," I said quickly. I've been forgetful lately." She didn't look convinced, but she prescribed a short course of rescue medication and reminded me again about the importance of consistent dosing. That night, I decided to have a serious conversation with Sarah about the medication sharing. I found her in her childhood bedroom, surrounded by outfit options for her final interview. "Sarah, we need to talk about the pills," I said, closing the door behind me. "What about them?" she asked without looking up from her closet. "I had a seizure today. Dr. Peterson thinks it's because I've been missing doses." Sarah finally turned to look at me, her face full of concern. "Oh my God, are you okay? That sounds scary." "I'm fine now, but it made me realize that we can't keep doing this. You need to find another solution for your anxiety." "But the final interview is tomorrow," she said. "This is literally the most important day of my entire career. I can't do it without something to calm my nerves." "Sarah, you're not hearing me. I had a seizure, a real one. I could have seriously hurt myself." "But you're fine now, right?" she said, and something in her tone made me look at her more closely. "I'm fine now because I took my medication and got medical attention, but if I keep missing doses—" "Look, can we talk about this after my interview?" she interrupted. "I'm really stressed about tomorrow, and this conversation is just making my anxiety worse." I stared at my sister, trying to process what she'd just said. I'd told her I'd had a seizure because of the medication sharing, and her primary concern was how our conversation about it was affecting her anxiety levels. "Sarah, do you understand what I just told you? You had a seizure, you're fine now, and you're worried about the medication thing. I get it. But tomorrow is my interview, and if I don't get this job, I don't know what I'm going to do. Can't we just get through tomorrow first?" That's when I realized that my sister didn't actually care about my seizure. It wasn't that she was callous or didn't love me, she just literally couldn't process that my medical emergency might be more important than her job interview. "You want me to give you more pills for tomorrow?" I said slowly. "Just one," she said quickly. "Maybe two in case I need a backup. I promise after I get this job and start making money, I'll see a real doctor and get my own anxiety medication. This is just to get me through tomorrow." I looked at my sister, really looked at her, and for the first time, I saw her clearly. I saw someone who had been enabled her entire life, who had never been asked to find her own solutions to her problems, who genuinely believed that other people's resources existed primarily to serve her needs. "No," I said. The word hung in the air between us like a physical thing. "What do you mean, no?" "I mean no. I'm not giving you any more of my medication. You need to find another way to manage your anxiety for tomorrow's interview." Sarah's face went through a series of expressions: surprise, hurt, anger, and finally, cold calculation. "Fine," she said. "I guess I know where I stand with you." "Sarah, that's not fair." "No, it's totally fair. I get it now. Your pills are more important to you than my entire future. Your doctor's rules are more important than your sister's mental health." Message received, loud and clear. She turned back to her closet, dismissing me with her body language. "That's not what this is about," I said, but she didn't respond. I left her room feeling like I'd done something terrible, but also strangely relieved. Finally, I'd set a boundary. Finally, I'd chosen my own health over my sister's demands. If only I'd known that Sarah had already found another way to get what she wanted. The night before the inheritance hearing, I did what I always did. I took my evening medication at exactly 8 p.m. and went to bed early. I wanted to be well rested for what I expected to be a long, emotionally draining day dealing with lawyers and family dynamics and the complicated process of dividing up my grandmother's estate. I woke up the next morning feeling oddly foggy, like I'd slept too deeply or not deeply enough. My pill organizer was sitting on my nightstand where I always kept it, but something looked wrong. It took me a moment to realize what it was. The compartment for Thursday morning was empty. I must have forgotten to refill it, I thought groggily. I went to my medicine cabinet and opened the bottle, but it was empty too. Completely empty. Panic started to rise in my chest as I searched my bathroom, my bedroom, my purse. Where were my pills? I always kept a week's worth in my organizer and at least a few days' worth in the bottle as backup. Then I remembered Sarah's interview the day before, and a cold certainty settled in my stomach. I called her phone, but it went straight to voicemail. I called my parents' landline, and Mom picked up on the second ring. "Hi, honey, you're up early. Are you nervous about the hearing today?" "Mom," Is Sarah there? She's sleeping, sweetheart. She was out late celebrating. She got the job. Can you believe it? After all these months of struggling, she finally caught a break. I need to talk to her. It's important. Rebecca, it's 6 in the morning. Can't this wait until later? No, it can't wait. Mom, I think Sarah took my medication again. All of it. There was a pause. Honey, maybe you just misplaced. I didn't misplace anything. My pill bottle is completely empty, and I'm supposed to take my morning dose in 2 hours before we go to court. Well, I'm sure there's a reasonable explanation. The reasonable explanation is that Sarah stole all of my medication the night before an important legal proceeding, knowing that I could have a seizure if I don't take it on schedule. My voice was rising, and I could hear the edge of hysteria creeping in. Mom's tone became soothing in that particular way that meant she was about to gaslight me. Rebecca, you're getting worked up over nothing. Sarah wouldn't do something like that. Maybe you took an extra dose and forgot, or maybe you dropped the bottle. Put Sarah on the phone. I'm not waking up your sister just because you're having anxiety about today. We'll sort all this out after the hearing, okay? She hung up on me. I sat in my kitchen, staring at my empty pill organizer, trying to figure out what to do. The inheritance hearing was in 4 hours. I was already starting to feel the familiar warning signs that came before a seizure, the strange taste in my mouth, the feeling that the world was slightly off-kilter. I could call Dr. Peterson's emergency line, but it would take hours to get an emergency prescription filled. I could skip the hearing, but that would mean giving up my right to my grandmother's inheritance. I could go to the hearing and hope for the best, but the stress of a legal proceeding combined with missed medication was a recipe for disaster. In the end, I made the choice that would change everything. I decided to go to the hearing and hope I could hold it together long enough to get through the legal proceedings. It was the worst decision of my life, and the best decision I ever made. I arrived at the courthouse at 9:30 a.m., 30 minutes before our scheduled hearing. The building was one of those imposing structures designed to make you feel small, marble floors, high ceilings, and the kind of echo that makes every footstep sound like a judgment. I was wearing my best black suit and carrying a folder with all the necessary paperwork, trying to look like I had my life together while my brain chemistry slowly destabilized. My family was already there, clustered together on a bench in the hallway like they were waiting for a church service to begin. Sarah looked radiant in a new dress I didn't recognize, probably bought to celebrate her job offer. Mom and Dad flanked her on either side, and I could hear Mom's voice carrying across the marble space as she gushed about Sarah's interview success. The hiring manager said she'd never seen someone handle pressure so well, Mom was saying. She said Sarah seemed so calm and confident, like she was born for the job. I wondered if Mom knew exactly why Sarah had seemed so calm during her interview. I wondered if she cared. Rebecca! Dad called out when he spotted me. There you are. We were starting to worry. I walked over to them, my legs feeling slightly unsteady. The metallic taste in my mouth was getting stronger, and there was a strange buzzing quality to the fluorescent lights overhead. How are you feeling, honey? Mom asked, giving me the kind of once-over that mothers do when they're checking for visible signs of distress. I'm fine, I lied. Sarah looked up at me with what I could only describe as smug satisfaction. You look a little pale. Are you sure you're okay? I said I'm fine. But I wasn't fine, and some part of Sarah knew it. She'd taken every single one of my pills, leaving me to navigate one of the most stressful days of my life with zero medication in my system. The irony wasn't lost on me that she was sitting there looking relaxed and confident, probably because she'd taken my morning dose along with everything else. Rebecca Martinez family? A bailiff appeared in the hallway, reading from a clipboard. That's us, Dad said, standing up and straightening his tie. We followed the bailiff into a smaller courtroom that felt more like a conference room. Judge Patricia Williams was already seated behind the bench, a woman in her 60s with silver hair and the kind of direct gaze that suggested she'd seen every form of human nonsense and had no patience for any of it. Good morning, Judge Williams said as we filed in. I understand we're here to discuss the distribution of Elena Rodriguez's estate. Is everyone present? Our lawyer, Mr. Chen, stood up and began the introductions. My cousins Marcus and David were there with their own legal representation, looking uncomfortable in their suits. The whole thing felt surreal, sitting in a courtroom to divide up my grandmother's belongings while my brain slowly marched toward a medical emergency. "Before we begin," Judge Williams said, "I want to make it clear that Mrs. Rodriguez left very specific instructions about how her estate should be divided. This hearing is primarily to ensure that all parties understand the terms of the will and to address any questions or concerns." She began reading from the will, her voice steady and professional. Equal division among the 4 grandchildren, with the house to be sold and the proceeds split accordingly. Some personal items were specifically designated for certain family members: Grandma's wedding ring for me, her recipe collection for Sarah, her tools for Marcus, her books for David. It should have been straightforward, but about 15 minutes into the proceedings, something started going wrong with my vision. The edges of everything began to blur, and the courtroom light seemed to pulse in a rhythm that didn't match anything else in the room. I gripped the edge of the table in front of me, trying to focus on Judge Williams' voice, but the words were starting to sound distorted, like she was speaking underwater. "Are you all right, Ms. Martinez?" the judge asked, and I realized she was looking directly at me. "I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?" My own voice sounded strange to my ears. "I was asking if you have any objections to the proposed division of the personal items." I tried to answer, but the metallic taste in my mouth was overwhelming now, and the fluorescent lights were definitely pulsing. I could feel my family's eyes on me, could sense their embarrassment at my inability to function normally in a professional setting. "She's fine," I heard Sarah say. "She just gets anxious sometimes." Anxious. As if anxiety could explain the way my neurons were misfiring, the way my brain was preparing to shut down completely. I started to say, but I couldn't finish the sentence because I'd forgotten what I needed. The room was tilting sideways, and there was a sound building in my head, like a freight train approaching. That's when the seizure hit. I don't remember falling, but I must have, because the next thing I knew, I was on the floor of the courtroom with people shouting around me. My body was convulsing in ways I couldn't control. My teeth were clenched so hard I could taste blood, and somewhere in the chaos I could hear Judge Williams calling for medical assistance. The seizure itself probably lasted less than 2 minutes, but it felt like hours. When it finally stopped, I found myself lying on the cold marble floor, staring up at the courtroom ceiling while paramedics knelt beside me. "Ms. Martinez, can you hear me?" one of the paramedics was saying. "Can you tell me your name?" "Rebecca," I managed to whisper. My tongue felt thick and strange in my mouth. "Good. Rebecca, do you know where you are?" "Courthouse," I said. The word came out slurred, but he understood. "That's right. You had a seizure, Rebecca. Do you have a history of seizures?" I nodded slightly, which made my head throb. "Are you on medication for seizures?" I tried to explain about the missing pills, about Sarah, about everything, but all that came out was taken, gone. One of the paramedics was checking my pulse while the other was asking my family questions. I could hear my mother's voice, high and strained with panic. "She has epilepsy," Mom was saying. "She takes medication for it. I don't understand why this happened." "When did she last take her medication?" the paramedic asked. There was a pause, a long pause. And in that pause, I saw my family's faces change as they realized what had happened. I'm not sure," Mom said finally. "Yesterday evening," Sarah said quietly. "She took it yesterday evening." The paramedic frowned. "Just yesterday evening? She should have taken her morning dose today as well. Do you know why she didn't?" Another pause, longer this time. Judge Williams had been standing off to the side, watching the medical emergency unfold in her courtroom, but now she stepped forward. "I'm going to need everyone except immediate family to step outside," she said firmly. "And I want to speak with whoever is responsible for Ms. Martinez's medical care." As the paramedics helped me sit up, I caught Sarah's eye. She looked terrified, but not for the reason I expected. She wasn't scared because her sister had just had a medical emergency. She was scared because she was starting to realize that her actions had consequences. "The medication," I managed to say to the paramedic. "Someone took it." "Someone took your seizure medication?" Judge Williams asked, her voice sharp with concern. I nodded, and the judge's expression darkened. Who took it? She asked, looking around at my family. The silence in that courtroom was deafening. Mom and Dad were staring at their shoes. Sarah was crying, but quietly, like she was trying not to draw attention to herself. I did, Sarah finally whispered. I took her pills. For my anxiety. I didn't know this would happen. Judge Williams looked at Sarah like she was speaking a foreign language. You took your sister's epilepsy medication for anxiety? I couldn't afford to see a doctor, Sarah said, her voice getting smaller. And Mom said it would probably be okay, and Rebecca had plenty. You said it would be okay? Judge Williams interrupted, looking at my mother. Mom's face went pale. I thought maybe 1 or 2 pills wouldn't hurt. How many pills are we talking about? The judge asked. Sarah looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. All of them, she whispered. All of them, Judge Williams repeated slowly. You took all of your sister's seizure medication, knowing she was supposed to appear in court today. I didn't think about the court date, Sarah said, which was probably the most honest thing she'd said all morning. Judge Williams looked at my parents. And you allowed this? Dad cleared his throat. We didn't know she'd taken all of them. We thought it was just a few pills here and there. A few pills here and there, the judge said, and I could hear the disbelief in her voice. Of someone else's prescription medication for a serious neurological condition. The paramedic who had been taking my blood pressure stood up. Judge Williams, we need to transport Ms. Martinez to the hospital for evaluation. Given the circumstances, I'm also required to report this as a case of potential medical neglect. Medical neglect? Mom gasped. That's ridiculous. We're her family. We love her. You love her, Judge Williams said flatly. But you allowed someone to steal her medication, knowing she had a medical condition that required consistent treatment. I watched this exchange from my position on the floor, feeling strangely detached from it all. For the first time in years, someone was taking my medical condition seriously. Someone was acknowledging that what had happened to me was wrong, not just unfortunate or dramatic or inconvenient. Your Honor. Mr. Chen, our family lawyer, stepped forward looking deeply uncomfortable. Perhaps we should postpone this hearing until Ms. Martinez has recovered. Oh, we're definitely postponing the hearing, Judge Williams said. But first, I'm ordering an immediate medical evaluation for Ms. Martinez, and I want a full report on the circumstances that led to this incident. She looked at Sarah with the kind of stare that could melt steel. Young lady, you may not realize this, but what you did could have killed your sister. Seizure medication isn't candy. It's not something you take because you're feeling anxious. It's a carefully calibrated treatment for a serious medical condition. Sarah was sobbing now, full-body sobs that made her whole frame shake. I'm sorry, she kept saying. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. You didn't know, the judge said, because you didn't bother to find out. You saw something that made you feel better, and you took it, without any regard for the person who actually needed it. She turned to my parents. And you two enabled this behavior instead of getting your daughter proper medical treatment for her anxiety. We couldn't afford, Mom started. You couldn't afford a doctor's visit, but you could afford to risk your other daughter's life? Judge Williams' voice was rising now. Do you have any idea what could have happened if she'd had this seizure while driving? Or while walking downstairs? Or alone in her apartment? The courtroom fell silent except for the sound of Sarah's crying and the quiet murmur of the paramedics preparing to transport me to the hospital. This hearing is postponed indefinitely, Judge Williams announced. Ms. Martinez, I want you to get proper medical treatment, and I want a full report from your doctor about the impact of missing your medication. Ms. Sarah Martinez, I strongly suggest you get professional help for your anxiety. The legal kind, not the kind that involves stealing medication from family members. She looked at my parents one more time. And I suggest you all think very carefully about what family loyalty actually means. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've confused enabling harmful behavior with love. As the paramedics wheeled me out of that courtroom, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Validation. Someone had seen what was happening to me and called it what it was. Wrong. Not dramatic, not selfish, not inconvenient. Wrong. It was the first step toward getting my life back. The emergency room at Denver General was exactly as sterile and chaotic as you'd expect. I spent 4 hours there while doctors ran tests, adjusted my medication levels, and documented everything that had led to my seizure. Dr. Peterson arrived around 2 p.m., looking more concerned than I'd ever seen her. "Rebecca," she said, pulling up a chair next to my bed. "The ER doctor filled me in on what happened. I need you to tell me the truth now. How long has this medication sharing been going on?" So I told her everything. About Sarah's anxiety, about my parents' enabling, about the gaslighting and the guilt trips, and the way I'd been made to feel selfish for wanting to keep my own medication, about the lockbox that was broken into, the spare key that was given away without my permission, the months of breakthrough seizures that I'd been too ashamed to report accurately. Dr. Peterson listened without interrupting, her expression growing darker with every detail. "Rebecca, what you're describing is medical abuse," she said when I finished. "Your family has been systematically sabotaging your treatment for a serious neurological condition." Hearing someone with medical authority call it abuse felt like being handed a lifeline I didn't even know I needed. "I know I should have been more firm about it," I said. "I should have—" "Stop," Dr. Peterson interrupted. "You should have been able to trust your family to respect your medical needs. You should have been able to keep your medication in your own home without worrying about it being stolen. None of this is your fault." She pulled out her prescription pad and started writing. "I'm prescribing a month's supply of medication to be filled today, and I'm setting you up with a specialty pharmacy that will deliver directly to your workplace. No one else will have access to your medication." "What about the inheritance hearing?" I asked. "Judge Williams' office called the hospital. The hearing is postponed until you're medically stable, and she's ordered a comprehensive medical evaluation to document the impact of the medication interference on your condition." That evening, my parents came to visit me in the hospital. They looked older somehow, deflated in a way I'd never seen before. Sarah wasn't with them. "How are you feeling, honey?" Mom asked, hovering awkwardly by my bed. "Better," I said truthfully. The new medication was already helping, and the IV fluids had cleared the last of the grogginess from my system. "Rebecca," Dad said, his voice gruff with emotion, "we need to talk about what happened today." I waited. "We had no idea," Mom said quickly. "We had no idea that Sarah was taking so much of your medication, or that it could cause something like this." "You knew she was taking my medication," I said quietly. "You told her it was okay. You told me I was being selfish for wanting to keep it." "We thought it was just a pill here and there," Dad said. "For anxiety. We didn't realize." "You didn't realize that epilepsy medication is serious?" I asked. "You didn't realize that I need it to function? To stay alive?" Mom started crying. "Of course we knew it was serious, but Sarah was struggling so much, and you seemed fine, and we just thought—" "You thought what? That my medical needs were less important than Sarah's convenience?" The words hung in the air between us. Finally, Dad spoke. "We were wrong," he said simply. "We were so wrong, Rebecca. We failed you as parents, and we almost lost you today." "The judge called it medical neglect," I said. Dad flinched like I'd slapped him. "I know, and she was right." We sat in silence for a while, the weight of years of dysfunction settling around us like dust. "Where's Sarah?" I asked finally. "At home," Mom said. She's not taking this well." I almost laughed at the irony. Sarah wasn't taking it well. "She wants to come see you," Mom continued. "She's been crying all day, saying she never meant for this to happen." "I don't want to see her right now," I said. Mom looked surprised. "Rebecca, she's your sister. She made a mistake, but she loves you." "No," I said, more firmly than I'd ever spoken to my mother. "She stole my medication, knowing I needed it, because she wanted it for herself. That's not love. That's selfishness." "She didn't know you'd have a seizure." "She didn't care enough to find out what could happen," I interrupted. "For 3 years, she's been taking my medication, and not once did she ask a doctor if it was safe. Not once did she research what epilepsy medication does or what happens when someone misses doses. She just took what she wanted because she wanted it. Dad was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "What do you need from us, Rebecca?" It was such a simple question, but no one in my family had ever asked it before. "I need you to stop making excuses for Sarah," I said. "I need you to understand that this wasn't just a mistake or a misunderstanding. This was a pattern of behavior that put my health at risk." "And then what?" Mom asked. "Do you want us to cut off Sarah? Stop loving her?" "I want you to love her enough to get her proper help for her anxiety, instead of letting her steal medication from other people. I want you to love me enough to prioritize my safety over her feelings." 3 weeks later, I was back in Judge Williams' courtroom, this time with my own lawyer. The medical evaluation had been thorough and damning. Months of missed doses, breakthrough seizures, and documented evidence of the psychological impact of having my medication constantly threatened. Sarah had finally seen a psychiatrist and been properly diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder. She was on appropriate medication and in therapy, paid for by my parents. She'd also been required to attend educational sessions about epilepsy and the dangers of sharing prescription medication. "Ms. Martinez," Judge Williams said, looking at me with something approaching respect. "How are you feeling?" "Much better, Your Honor. My seizures are under control again, and I'm working with a therapist to process everything that happened." "Good. Now, regarding the estate distribution, I've reviewed the medical reports, and I have some concerns about the family dynamics that led to the incident in my courtroom." She looked at Sarah, who was sitting with my parents and their lawyer on the other side of the room. Sarah looked smaller somehow, like the weight of what she'd done was finally sinking in. "Ms. Sarah Martinez, do you understand the seriousness of what you did?" "Yes, Your Honor," Sarah said quietly. "I understand that I could have killed my sister. I understand that what I did was wrong, and I'm getting help now. And do you understand that your actions have consequences beyond your sister's health?" Sarah looked confused. "I'm not sure what you mean, Your Honor." Judge Williams opened a file on her desk. "Your grandmother's will included a provision that I haven't mentioned yet. She was very specific that her estate should only go to family members who demonstrated genuine care and respect for each other." My heart started racing. I'd never heard about any such provision. After reviewing the evidence of the systematic medical abuse that Ms. Rebecca Martinez endured and the family's enabling of that abuse, I'm required to consider whether the current distribution plan reflects your grandmother's wishes." "What does that mean?" Dad asked. "It means," Judge Williams said, "that I'm modifying the estate distribution. Ms. Sarah Martinez, your actions directly endangered your sister's life. Your portion of the inheritance will be held in trust and used to pay for Ms. Rebecca Martinez's medical expenses, including therapy to address the trauma you caused." Sarah gasped. "You can't do that." "I can, and I am. Your grandmother's will specifically states that inheritance should go to family members who embody the values of love, respect, and care that she held dear. Stealing medication from a family member with a serious medical condition doesn't qualify." The courtroom was dead silent. "Furthermore," Judge Williams continued, "I'm recommending that Ms. Rebecca Martinez receive counseling on establishing healthy boundaries with family members, and that the family as a whole seek therapy to address the dysfunctional patterns that led to this situation." I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Justice. Real, tangible justice. "Ms. Rebecca Martinez," the judge said, turning to me, "I want you to know that what happened to you was not your fault. You have the right to prioritize your own health and safety, and anyone who tells you otherwise is wrong." As we left the courthouse that day, my family walked in silence. Sarah was devastated about losing her inheritance, but for the first time, no one was asking me to fix it, to give up my own portion to make her feel better, to prioritize her feelings over the consequences of her actions. It felt like freedom. 6 months after the inheritance hearing, I was sitting in my new apartment, a beautiful 2-bedroom place across town from my parents, when I got a call from my cousin Marcus. "Rebecca, I've been thinking about what happened at the court hearing," he said. "I wanted you to know that David and I talked, and we're donating part of our inheritance to an epilepsy research foundation." in Grandma Elena's name. It was such an unexpected gesture that I started crying right there on the phone. "You don't have to do that," I said. "We want to. What happened to you?" It opened our eyes to things we'd never thought about. We had no idea how serious epilepsy was or how medication works. We want to help make sure other people don't go through what you did. That conversation led to something I never could have imagined. With the modified inheritance from the court's decision and contributions from Marcus and David, I founded the Elena Rodriguez Foundation for Epilepsy Awareness. Our mission was simple: education about seizure disorders and advocacy for patients' rights. The Foundation's first project was developing educational materials about the dangers of sharing prescription medications. We created pamphlets, websites, and even a short documentary featuring interviews with neurologists, patients, and families who had learned the hard way about the importance of proper medication management. Sarah, to her credit, agreed to be interviewed for the documentary. It was the first time we'd had a real conversation since the court hearing. "I want people to understand what I did," she said, sitting across from me in the Foundation's small office. "I want them to know that anxiety is real and it's serious, but stealing someone else's medication isn't the answer." She'd been in therapy for months and was doing much better. The proper anxiety medication had helped stabilize her moods, and she was working full-time at the retail job she'd gotten with my stolen pills. There was still tension between us. There probably always would be, but at least now she understood the gravity of what she'd done. "Do you think you'll ever forgive me?" she asked during the interview. I thought about it for a long moment. "I'm working on it, but forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting what happened, and it doesn't mean going back to the way things were." "What does it mean?" "It means understanding that you're not the same person who stole my medication. It means hoping that the work you're doing now prevents other families from going through what we went through." Sarah nodded, tears in her eyes. "I never want anyone else to feel what I felt when I realized I could have killed you. That's not a weight anyone should carry." My relationship with my parents had also evolved, though it took time. They'd started family therapy after the court hearing and slowly began to understand the patterns of behavior that had enabled Sarah's medication theft. It wasn't easy. Decades of family dynamics don't change overnight. But they were trying. "We raised you girls to think that family means never saying no to each other," Mom said during one of our therapy sessions. "We thought we were teaching love and generosity, but we were actually teaching that boundaries were selfish." "Grandma Elena knew better," Dad added. "She was always telling us that love without boundaries isn't love at all. It's chaos." That insight led to the Foundation's second major project, developing resources for families dealing with chronic medical conditions. We created support groups, educational workshops, and counseling services specifically designed to help families establish healthy boundaries around medical care. The work was fulfilling in a way I'd never experienced. For the first time in my adult life, I felt like my epilepsy was serving a purpose beyond just being something I had to manage. It had become a tool for helping other people, a bridge to understanding and advocacy. Dr. Peterson became one of the Foundation's medical advisors, and she often spoke at our educational events. "What Rebecca experienced is more common than people realize," she would tell audiences. "Family members with good intentions can cause serious harm when they interfere with medical treatment. Education is the key to prevention." The Foundation also connected me with other people who had similar experiences. Patients whose medications had been stolen or misused by family members. People who had learned to advocate for themselves in dysfunctional family systems. Survivors of various forms of medical abuse. One woman, Maria, told me about her diabetic daughter whose insulin had been repeatedly taken by a relative who thought it would help with weight loss. Another man, James, shared how his family had convinced him to stop taking his psychiatric medications because they thought he was dependent on them. "The hardest part," Maria said during one of our support group meetings, "wasn't even the medical danger. It was the gaslighting, the constant feeling that maybe we were wrong to insist on proper medical care." "That's the insidious part of medical abuse within families," I replied. "It comes disguised as love and caring, so victims end up feeling guilty for protecting their own health." These conversations reinforced something I'd learned through my own experience. Healing from family trauma isn't about cutting people off or holding grudges forever. It's about creating new patterns of relationship based on respect, understanding, and genuine care. A year after the Foundation's launch, we received a letter that brought me to tears. It was from a teenager named Alex, whose older brother had been stealing his ADHD medication. "I was starting to think I was crazy," Alex wrote. "My grades were dropping, I couldn't focus, and my brother kept telling me I was just making excuses. Then I saw your documentary at school, and I realized what was happening. I showed it to my parents, and now my brother is getting proper help for his addiction, and I'm getting counseling for the trauma of feeling like I couldn't trust my own family. Thank you for making me feel like I wasn't alone." Letters like Alex's reminded me why the work mattered. They also reminded me how far I'd come from the woman who used to apologize for needing her own medication. These days, I keep my medication in a simple pill organizer on my kitchen counter. No locks, no hiding places, no anxiety about whether it will be there when I need it. I live alone by choice, in a space where my medical needs are respected and prioritized. Sarah and I have dinner together once a month, always at a restaurant, always with clear boundaries about topics we discuss and don't discuss. She's doing well in her job and has been promoted to assistant manager. She's also become an advocate in her own right, speaking to college students about mental health and the importance of seeking proper treatment for anxiety and depression. My parents and I have Sunday dinner every few weeks, but the dynamic is completely different now. They ask about my health, they respect my boundaries, and they've learned to value my well-being as much as they value family harmony. It's not the relationship I had with them growing up, but it's healthier and more honest. The Elena Rodriguez Foundation has grown beyond anything I imagined. We've helped change hospital policies around medication security, developed educational curricula for medical schools about family dynamics and patient advocacy, and provided support to hundreds of families navigating chronic illness. But perhaps most importantly, the Foundation has become a place where people like me can share their stories without shame, seek support without judgment, and transform their trauma into purpose. Last week, I was invited to speak at a conference for epilepsy specialists about family dynamics and medication compliance. Standing at that podium, looking out at an audience of medical professionals who took my condition seriously, I thought about how different my life might have been if I'd found my voice earlier. "The seizure I had in that courtroom was the worst day of my life," I told the audience. "It was also the day I learned that my health matters, that my boundaries are valid, and that true family love means respecting each other's well-being, not sacrificing it for convenience or misplaced loyalty." After my presentation, a young neurologist approached me with tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she said. "I have patients who struggle with medication compliance, and I never considered that family dynamics might be part of the problem. This changes how I'm going to approach those conversations." That's when I knew that Grandma Elena would have been proud of what her inheritance had become. Not just money passed down through generations, but wisdom, advocacy, and healing that rippled out to touch lives she never could have imagined. I still have epilepsy. I still take medication twice a day, every day, at exactly the same times. But now those pills represent something different than they used to. They're not just medication. They're a symbol of my right to prioritize my own health, my journey toward healing, and my commitment to helping others find their own voices in families that might not always know how to listen. Sometimes the greatest revenge is living well. Sometimes it's building something beautiful from the ashes of what was broken. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, it's both.